After the dinosaurs disappeared, the ocean was left without its giants. The creatures that had ruled the seas for more than 100 million years were gone, erased in the same catastrophe that ended the age of dinosaurs. And for a time, the ocean simply waited, recovering, rebuilding, filling in the spaces left behind with smaller, more cautious things, while the world above it found its footing again. Then something entered the water that had no business being there. It was not a reptile. It was not a shark. It was a mammal, warm blooded, descended from a lineage that had only recently come down from the trees and learned to walk across dry land. And yet here it was, in the warm shallows of the ancient Tethys Sea. 13 million years later, its descendant adapted perfectly to life at sea and grew longer than a modern day school bus, hunting with a ferocity the ocean had not seen since the great marine reptiles vanished. Its skull resembled that of a giant marine reptile so closely that the first scientists to study it believed they had discovered an enormous ancient lizard. They named it Basilosaurus, the king lizard. The name was wrong, but it stuck. For 7 million years, it ruled the oceans without challenge. Unlike the great whales alive today, it did not strain tiny prey from seawater. It hunted, captured, and chewed large animals with a bite comparable to that of a modern saltwater crocodile. Then it disappeared, leaving behind no descendants, only fossils scattered across deserts that were once covered by a vanished sea. In today's story, we are going back to those ancient seas to examine the remarkable transformation that turned a four-legged land mammal into the first great marine predator of the post-dinosaur world. An ocean can remember an absence long after the event that created it has passed. Across the closing chapters of the Age of Reptiles, every layer of the sea had settled into a balance, shaped by immense hunters whose presence reached from shallow coastlines to open water. Food webs rose toward them, generations lived beneath them, and countless smaller creatures adjusted their lives around predators that had dominated marine ecosystems for more than 100 million years. Among those rulers were mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs, each following a different path through evolution while sharing the highest place in the food chain. The largest mosasaurs stretched to about 17 meters, which is about 56 feet, with streamlined bodies capable of swift pursuit through warm seas. Their influence extended beyond the prey they captured. Every successful hunt altered the movement, breeding, and survival of countless other animals, shaping an entire marine community from its highest level downward. That long order ended when the asteroid responsible for the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction struck Earth. The devastation reached across continents and oceans alike. Within a geologically brief span, every large marine reptile disappeared. Lineages that had flourished for ages vanished together, leaving no surviving descendants to reclaim their place. The structure of the sea remained, though its highest tier had fallen away. Life continued without hesitation. Sharks cruised familiar waters. Early bony fish multiplied through reefs and coastal shallows. Sea turtles crossed broad stretches of open ocean, and primitive seabirds searched the surface from above. Each remained well suited to its own way of living, though none carried the same ecological weight once held by the giant reptiles. Their existence sustained the recovering seas, yet the balance had shifted into something noticeably different. Sharks deserve particular attention within that changing world. They were skilled hunters, though many also accepted whatever opportunity appeared before them, feeding on weakened prey or drifting carcasses when circumstances favored efficiency over pursuit. Such flexibility helped them survive an unstable age, though it did not recreate the commanding influence once exercised by enormous marine reptiles. The highest position in the ecosystem remained open, with no single predator reorganizing the ocean around its own presence. Millions of years passed beneath changing currents and familiar tides. Fish diversified, coral communities expanded once more. Marine mammals had not yet claimed the horizon, and nothing emerged to fill the enormous vacancy at the summit of the food web. The opening remained real, extending across an interval of deep time, measured in countless generations instead of individual lives. The future ruler of those waters had not entered the sea. Its ancestors still traveled across solid ground, carrying lungs shaped for air, legs built for walking, and a body that revealed almost nothing of the transformation waiting ahead. The next chapter of this story begins far from rolling waves, along the edge of freshwater landscapes, where the first steps toward an entirely different existence had only just begun. Among the many stories preserved in the fossil record, few reshape familiar ideas as completely as the ancestry of whales. Their enormous bodies, powerful tails, and lifelong devotion to the sea seem to place them beyond comparison with ordinary land mammals. Every breath they take, every migration they complete, and every calf they raise unfolds in water. Even so, the deepest roots of every living whale remain firmly planted on dry ground. The closest living relative of every whale alive today is the hippopotamus. Blue whales, sperm whales, killer whales, dolphins, and porpoises all share a common ancestry with an animal that spends much of its life in rivers and lakes. Traveling farther back through time reveals an even older ancestor, one belonging to a group of hoofed mammals known as the even-toed ungulates. That broader family also includes cows, deer, pigs, antelope, and giraffes, creatures that appear completely disconnected from the open sea. This connection overturns one of the most common assumptions about whale evolution. Their lineage never passed through a stage as fish before returning to water. The ancestors of whales had already become fully terrestrial mammals, breathing air, walking across landscapes, nursing their young with milk, and carrying warm blood through their bodies. The shoreline entered their history only after millions of years spent entirely away from marine life. Around 50 million years ago, there were still no whales that anyone today would recognize. Oceans held fish, sharks, turtles, and many other marine animals, yet no giant cetaceans crossed those waters. Along riverbanks and floodplains lived hoofed mammals whose appearance offered almost no hint of the future waiting within their descendants. One of those ordinary looking creatures belonged to a lineage that would eventually abandon the land completely. The transformation that followed stands among the fastest large body evolutionary changes ever documented. The asteroid responsible for the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction struck Earth about 66 million years ago. Basilosaurus appeared roughly 41 million years ago. Between those moments stretched approximately 25 million years, a span that seems immense beside the length of a human lifetime. Within the rhythms of geology, however, such a change unfolded with surprising speed. Entire skeletons shifted, limbs changed purpose, hearing adapted to water, bodies reshaped themselves for swimming until a former land mammal became the leading predator of a global ocean. Evolution achieved this without planning ahead or pursuing a distant destination. Every generation carried only slight differences from the one before it. Individuals that found food more efficiently near water survived more often. Their descendants inherited those useful traits, while fresh variations accumulated across thousands upon thousands of generations. Small advantages gathered together until the original animal became almost impossible to recognize within its own descendants. Looking back from the age of Basilosaurus makes that journey appear direct, though the living creatures that experienced it could never have sensed the destination awaiting their distant offspring. Each generation occupied only its own landscape, adapting to immediate conditions while unknowingly contributing another layer to one of Earth's most extraordinary biological transformations. The story begins with no giant whale crossing tropical seas, only a modest hoofed mammal exploring the edges of freshwater, carrying within its body possibilities that had not yet taken shape. The first recognizable chapter of whale history begins beside freshwater, where river channels wandered across what is now Pakistan. Around 50 million years ago, those banks supported a rich collection of mammals, reptiles, fish, and birds. Among them moved a creature called Pakicetus, an animal whose appearance blended so naturally into the landscape that almost no one would have imagined. It carried the earliest blueprint of a future whale. Pakicetus weighed about 45 kilograms, which is about 99 pounds. Its body resembled that of a lean hunting mammal, comparable in size to a large dog or a small wolf. Four sturdy legs supported its weight across firm ground. A long snout extended ahead of alert eyes, while a tail balanced its movements through brush and along muddy shorelines. Small hooves tipped its toes, linking it unmistakably to the family of even-toed hoofed mammals described by its ancestry. At first glance, nothing about the skeleton suggested a life destined for the sea. The limbs remained fully capable of walking. The spine carried the proportions of a terrestrial predator. Every visible feature encouraged the same conclusion, that this animal belonged entirely to the land. Paleontologists, however, discovered something far more revealing inside the skull, where external appearance could no longer guide expectation. Forming the floor of the middle ear was a dense structure called the auditory bulla. In Pakicetus, this bone possessed a specialized thickness and internal shape found in every whale discovered since. Among land mammals, no equivalent feature has been identified. Within whales, it serves as a critical component for detecting the direction of sounds traveling through water. Long before flippers, tail flukes, or streamlined bodies appeared, this distinctive adaptation had already entered the lineage. That single anatomical detail transformed the meaning of the fossil. The skull carried evidence of an evolutionary commitment still invisible elsewhere in the body. Millions of years before descendants would roam tropical seas, the sensory foundation for underwater hearing had already begun to develop. Evolution often proceeds this way, changing one system while others continue to reflect an older lifestyle, allowing different parts of the body to move through time at different speeds. The teeth of Pakicetus provide another glimpse into those gradual changes. Their shape suggests a diet that included fish alongside prey gathered on land. It likely entered shallow rivers to search for food, standing in water while watching for movement below the surface. Hours spent near river margins would have rewarded individuals capable of hearing, locating, and capturing aquatic prey with greater efficiency. Small advantages accumulated across many generations, each preserving traits that improved success in these transitional habitats. Equally significant is the place where the fossils were uncovered. Pakicetus did not emerge from marine sediments or the floor of an ancient ocean. Its remains rested within reddish river deposits laid down across a continental landscape. The animal still belonged to freshwater environments and dry ground. Even so, its biology had already begun responding to opportunities found beyond the shoreline. Looking across the skeleton, it becomes clear that transformation rarely announces itself with dramatic change. It gathers through subtle adjustments, each preserved in stone with extraordinary patience. Pakicetus remained a land mammal in form and daily life, while carrying within its skull the earliest unmistakable signal that an entirely different existence had already begun to unfold. Evolution sometimes leaves behind a trail so complete that each discovery seems to take the hand of the one before it. The path leading from Pachycetus to Basilosaurus belongs to that rare category. Instead of isolated clues, separated by enormous gaps, paleontologists uncovered a succession of fossils that reveal one gradual adjustment after another, preserving the long passage from a shoreline hunter to a fully aquatic predator with remarkable continuity. The next known step belonged to Ambulocetus, whose name means walking whale. It appeared around 49 million years ago and still carried a body capable of moving across land. Powerful hind limbs supported its weight outside the water, although those same limbs had already become excellent tools for swimming. It likely pushed through rivers and coastal shallows with broad strokes of its feet, moving in a manner resembling an otter. Water had become the setting for much of its daily life, while solid ground remained available whenever needed. A couple of million years later, another chapter appeared in Rhodocetus. By approximately 47 million years ago, the skeleton had changed again. The pelvis had become smaller, reducing its importance for walking. The feet lengthened and showed stronger adaptations for swimming. Along the spine, the pattern of movement began shifting toward the familiar up and down motion used by modern whales, instead of relying mainly on the hind limbs. Rhodocetus could still climb onto land, though every generation carried it farther from the world its ancestors once knew. The progression continued through a diverse collection of early whales, known as the protocetids. Living between roughly 45 million and 43 million years ago, these animals crossed another major threshold. Evidence suggests they became the first whales capable of giving birth in the water, freeing their descendants from the need to return to shore for reproduction. An entire stage of life that had always depended upon land could now unfold at sea. The coastline changed from a necessity into little more than a distant connection preserved within anatomy. No single generation transformed everything at once. Small differences accumulated with steady persistence. Individuals that captured fish more efficiently survived in greater numbers, passing useful traits to their offspring. Better swimmers reached prey more easily. Bodies that spent longer periods in water gradually favored stronger swimming muscles, lighter hind limbs, and increasingly flexible spines. Across thousands upon thousands of generations, tiny advantages merged into sweeping biological change. During those 15 million years, which is about 9.3 miles in deep time only as a metaphor, would make no sense. Better to avoid conversion because years no conversion. Four walking legs slowly changed their roles. The forelimbs broadened toward flippers. Hind limbs diminished until they contributed little to movement. The backbone elongated and became increasingly specialized for propulsion through water. The skull shifted as sensory systems adapted to an aquatic existence, while breathing, hearing, and feeding continued following the same direction. By about 41 million years ago, almost every visible reminder of terrestrial life had been reshaped. The descendant that emerged no longer resembled the hoofed mammal that once wandered riverbanks. It belonged completely to the sea, carrying a body assembled through countless incremental refinements rather than dramatic leaps. Every fossil along this sequence preserves another step on that patient climb, showing that the greatest transformations in natural history are often built from changes so modest that each generation would have appeared entirely ordinary to its own time. Seen as a complete skeleton, Basilosaurus seems to belong to a branch of life that no longer exists. Familiar features appear at first glance. then dissolve into combinations found nowhere among living whales. Every bone carries echoes of its ancestry while revealing a body shaped for an entirely aquatic existence. It had reached the destination its predecessors spent millions of years approaching, though it arrived with a form unlike anything that followed. Adult Basilosaurus measured roughly 15 to 18 meters in length, which is about 49 to 59 feet. That immense body made it the largest known animal on Earth during its time and one of the largest mammals to appear after the disappearance of the dinosaurs. Even so, length alone creates the wrong impression. Anyone imagining the broad, muscular outline of a blue whale would be picturing a creature built according to a much later design. Its body stretched into an unusually slender profile, resembling an enormous ribbon of muscle passing through warm coastal seas. The torso remained narrow from head to tail, producing a serpentine outline that gave the animal an appearance unlike modern cetaceans. Instead of relying upon a compact frame built for tremendous bursts of power, Basilosaurus distributed its strength across an elongated spine capable of flowing through the water in graceful vertical waves. That distinctive movement depended upon an unusual series of vertebrae. Unlike the solid bones found in living whales, the vertebrae of Basilosaurus contained hollow spaces filled with fluid. This construction reduced weight while increasing flexibility, allowing the body to bend with exceptional freedom. Such mobility probably came with a trade-off. It may have sacrificed sustained swimming speed across great distances, though the warm coastal environments it inhabited placed greater value on maneuverability than prolonged travel. The surrounding climate also shaped its appearance. Tropical seas remained warm throughout the year, removing the need for the thick, insulating blubber carried by whales inhabiting colder oceans today. Basilosaurus possessed a lean body covered by smooth skin, with no dorsal fin rising from its back. Everything about its exterior reflected an animal perfectly matched to shallow marine habitats, where water temperatures stayed consistently high. Its forelimbs had already completed much of their transformation into flippers. Looking beneath the outer shape, however, revealed an unexpected reminder of terrestrial ancestry. Each flipper still enclosed an elbow joint capable of bending, preserving the basic framework of a mammalian arm. Modern whales have lost that flexibility through further evolutionary change, making Basilosaurus an unusual blend of familiar whale anatomy and inherited skeletal design. Perhaps the most striking feature remained near the rear of the body. Tiny hind limbs measured about 60 centimeters, which is about 24 inches or nearly 2 feet. Each contained knee joints, ankle bones, and individual toes. They connected to a small pelvis suspended within muscle instead of attaching directly to the spine. These limbs could neither support weight nor provide meaningful propulsion through water. They persisted as anatomical remnants, carried forward from ancestors that once crossed solid ground. Completing this remarkable body was another innovation whose influence extended far beyond Basilosaurus itself. Fossil evidence preserves the oldest confirmed whale tail flukes known to science, the horizontal structure that powers every living whale today. With that addition, the transformation from land mammal to fully aquatic giant had reached an entirely new expression, creating a swimmer whose skeleton announced both an ancient inheritance and a future that countless whales would later refine. Among all the bones preserved from Basilosaurus, none reveal its way of life more clearly than the skull. Every ridge, socket, and tooth records an animal shaped for direct confrontation with large prey. Although the rest of its body departed from familiar mammalian forms, the head carried an outline that reminded early scientists of a giant crocodile. The resemblance came from proportion rather than ancestry. A long, narrow profile, strengthened by broad attachment points where immense jaw muscles anchored themselves. That elongated skull supported a mouth unlike that of any whale alive today. Modern baleen whales strain tiny animals from seawater, while living toothed whales usually seize prey and swallow it with little chewing. Basilosaurus followed an older and more forceful strategy. At the front of its jaws stood sturdy, pointed incisors and enlarged canine-shaped teeth that locked firmly around struggling prey. Farther back waited heavy molars bearing multiple cusps and serrated edges, perfectly suited for gripping, slicing, and crushing flesh. Those molars preserve one of the clearest pieces of evidence for its feeding behavior. Their surfaces display distinctive vertical wear marks, created when the upper and lower teeth repeatedly sheared against one another. Fossils often reveal the shape of an animal, though far less frequently do they preserve a record of movement. In Basilosaurus, every worn surface shows that food passed through a true chewing motion before being swallowed. Such processing was uncommon among large marine predators of the time, giving this whale another feature that separated it from both the reptiles that came before and the whales that followed. Its jaws also possessed tremendous mechanical power. Conservative estimates place the bite force at about 16,400 newtons, while some reconstructions suggest it may have exceeded 20,000 newtons. That range closely matches the crushing bite delivered by a large saltwater crocodile. It also approaches the force measured in a great white shark, placing Basilosaurus among the strongest biters known within marine vertebrates. Combined with its elongated skull and cutting teeth, that strength allowed it to subdue prey through repeated, controlled bites instead of relying upon a single crushing strike. The skull still displayed signs that whale evolution remained unfinished. The breathing opening had begun migrating backward across the head, though it had not reached the position seen in living whales. Instead, it rested farther forward, between the eye sockets, preserving another transitional stage in the long reshaping of the face. Even the arrangement of the bones hinted that the familiar whale profile had not yet fully emerged. Inside the skull, additional changes were unfolding. Basilosaurus possessed the asymmetrical structure found in modern toothed whales, an adaptation associated with underwater hearing. Along the lower jaw, a specialized fat pad transmitted sound efficiently toward the inner ear, allowing the animal to determine where noises originated beneath the surface. Even so, another defining feature of living dolphins and many other toothed whales had not yet evolved. There was no melon organ capable of focusing sound into powerful pulses, and therefore no echolocation. Basilosaurus listened carefully to the surrounding sea, though it could not construct the detailed acoustic picture generated by its distant relatives. Taken together, the skull reveals a remarkable balance between inheritance and innovation. It remained unmistakably mammalian while serving as an instrument of predation refined across millions of years. The jaws that once belonged to distant hoofed ancestors had become capable of ruling an ocean, carrying within their structure the history of an extraordinary transformation written directly into bone. A predator reveals itself most clearly through the traces it leaves on other lives. Teeth pressed into bone, fractured skulls, and the remains preserved within ancient sediments together describe habits that vanished millions of years ago. Basilosaurus left all of these records behind. They show an animal that searched actively for prey, pursued it through open water, and killed with deliberate force instead of waiting for opportunity to drift within reach. Several independent discoveries support that picture, Fossilized stomach contents identify what it consumed. Bite marks preserved on prey. Skeletons reveal where attacks landed. The design of its skull and jaws matches the behavior recorded in those fossils with striking precision. Each line of evidence strengthens the others until they combine into a consistent portrait of one of the first great mammalian hunters of the sea. Its menu included large fish and sharks, though another prey animal appears again and again within the fossil record. That animal was Dorodon atrox, an early whale measuring about 5 meters, which is about 16 feet. Dorodon shared the warm waters of the Tethys Sea with Basilosaurus in considerable numbers. Although both belonged to the whale lineage, they occupied very different places within the food web. One represented a growing marine mammal. The other had already become the dominant predator of its age. The skulls of Dorodon preserve evidence that is remarkably direct. Many display deep punctures and crushing damage concentrated around the head. Those wounds match both the spacing and shape of Basilosaurus' teeth, while the width of the bites corresponds closely with its jaws. Paleontologists can compare these injuries with the anatomy of known predators, allowing the attacker to be identified from the damage alone. The wounds do not appear random or scattered. They repeatedly target areas capable of ending a struggle quickly, suggesting deliberate strikes directed toward the skull instead of prolonged attacks across the body. Patterns within fossil sites add another layer to this picture. In the Egyptian locality now called the Valley of the Whales, numerous juvenile Dorodon skeletons have been uncovered together. Their concentration suggests that mothers gathered there to give birth and raise young in comparatively protected waters. Such places would have offered Basilosaurus an unusually dependable source of vulnerable prey. Modern killer whales often return to whale nursery grounds for similar reasons, timing their visits to coincide with the presence of inexperienced calves. The resemblance lies in ecological strategy rather than close behavioral inheritance, showing that similar opportunities can produce similar hunting patterns across widely separated ages. Everything known about Basilosaurus also points toward a solitary hunter. Its brain lacked the enlargement associated with coordinated group hunting in modern dolphins and killer whales. Cooperative tactics offered little advantage in an ocean where no rival predator challenged its position. One enormous individual possessed more than enough strength to overpower prey without assistance. Taken together, these discoveries reveal a hunter operating through pursuit, precision, and overwhelming physical power. It relied upon keen hearing, sharp vision, powerful jaws, and direct attacks delivered at close range. The evidence rests in broken skulls, worn teeth, and fossilized skeletons scattered across rocks that once formed the floor of a tropical sea. Long after the predator itself disappeared, those marks remained, preserving moments of pursuit that unfolded across waters no longer found anywhere on Earth. Sometimes the clearest account of an extinct hunter is found within its own remains. Bones can reveal size and movement, teeth can suggest feeding habits, and skulls can hint at strength. On rare occasions, however, an animal preserves the final evidence of its own life inside its body. Basilosaurus left behind such a record, allowing paleontologists to examine a meal consumed about 40 million years ago, resting where the creature itself settled onto the floor of the Tethys Sea. During the year 2015, excavations at Wadi Al-Hitan, known in English as the Valley of the Whales, uncovered the first complete skeleton of Basilosaurus ever recovered. Stretching approximately 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, the skeleton remained remarkably intact. lying where the carcass had come to rest after death. Layer upon layer of sediment gradually enclosed the bones until the surrounding seabed became solid rock. By extraordinary chance, the region corresponding to the stomach still contained the remains of its final meal. Within that preserved cavity lay the bones of a young Dorodon, fragments of a sawfish, pieces of crab shell, and the remains of large bony fish. Each fragment displayed partial digestion, along with damage matching the distinctive teeth of Basilosaurus. The evidence required remarkably little interpretation. These were not isolated fossils washed together by currents or chance burial. They occupied the precise location expected for stomach contents, enclosed by the ribs of the predator that had swallowed them. The discoveries transformed earlier deductions into direct physical confirmation. Before this specimen emerged from the desert, scientists relied upon the shape of Basilosaurus teeth, wear patterns across their surfaces, and injuries preserved on prey skeletons to reconstruct its feeding behavior. Those clues had already pointed toward an active hunter capable of killing other marine mammals. The preserved stomach contents demonstrated that those interpretations accurately reflected reality. The predator had consumed young whales, fish, and other marine animals during its final days, leaving behind a complete ecological snapshot sealed within stone. The surrounding rocks contributed another remarkable detail. Embedded in the bones of Basilosaurus itself were teeth belonging to Otodus sokolovi, a formidable shark that lived during the same interval. These teeth were absent from the stomach and instead remained lodged in the skeleton. Their position indicates scavenging after death rather than combat during life. Once the giant hunter stopped moving and descended through the water, other carnivores arrived to feed upon its body. Even the dominant predator eventually became nourishment for another creature. One excavation therefore captured several roles within the same ecosystem. Predator, prey, and scavenger all appeared together, preserved within a single site after millions of years of burial. Such completeness is exceptionally uncommon in the fossil record, where bones are usually scattered, weathered, or separated long before discovery. Here, the sequence remained largely intact, allowing ancient interactions to be reconstructed with unusual confidence. Wadi Al-Hitan offers an even broader perspective. Roughly 1,000 whale skeletons have been identified across the area, with many still resting in their original positions. Several have been left exposed along walking paths, allowing visitors to follow the outlines of creatures that once crossed tropical waters. Today, the locality stands about 150 kilometers, which is about 93 miles, from Cairo, protected as a World Heritage Site of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Dry desert winds now pass over ground that has not known the sea for roughly 35 million years, while the stones continue preserving the final moments of an ocean long vanished. A remarkable contradiction rested inside the head of Basilosaurus. Its body commanded the warm seas with overwhelming physical authority, yet the organ directing that body remained modest when compared with the brains of living whales. The largest predator of its age achieved complete ecological dominance without the mental complexity that defines many marine mammals today. Its success emerged through anatomy refined for pursuit, powerful senses, and a world that rewarded strength more readily than sophisticated thought. The skull reveals part of that story. Basilosaurus possessed the asymmetrical arrangement shared by modern toothed whales, showing that important changes to hearing had already begun. Those similarities, however, stopped well before the extraordinary adaptations found in dolphins, sperm whales, and killer whales. It lacked the specialized fatty structure called the melon organ, which living toothed whales use to focus and transmit the rapid sound pulses that form biological sonar. Without that structure, Basilosaurus could not build detailed acoustic maps of the surrounding sea or detect distant prey through reflected sound alone. Another adaptation had already appeared. A specialized fat pad within the lower jaw carried underwater vibrations toward the inner ear, allowing the animal to determine the direction from which sounds arrived. This ability offered a meaningful advantage while hunting through cloudy coastal waters where vision alone could become unreliable. Even so, directional hearing remained fundamentally different from the elaborate biosonar employed by modern whales. Basilosaurus listened to its surroundings, but it did not illuminate them with sound. Evidence from the brain case suggests that its overall brain remained relatively small for an animal measuring approximately 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, in length. Paleontologists estimate that its encephalization, the relationship between brain size and body size, resembled far less cognitively demanding mammals than the highly intelligent whales inhabiting the oceans today. The anatomy provides little support for advanced vocal communication, complex social behavior, or the transmission of learned traditions from one generation to another. Such limitations strongly suggest a solitary existence. Modern whales, displaying remarkable intelligence, almost always depend upon intricate social lives. They form enduring family groups, coordinate hunts, exchange distinctive calls, and pass behaviors across generations through observation and experience. Basilosaurus appears to have followed another path entirely. The fossil evidence points toward an individual hunter relying upon personal strength instead of companions. It searched alone, pursued alone, fed alone, and most likely reached the end of its life without the protective company seen among many living cetaceans. Its accomplishments, therefore, rested upon direct physical capability. A long, flexible body carried it through productive coastal seas. Powerful jaws processed prey with crushing efficiency. Acute underwater hearing identified movement nearby, while keen vision likely completed the hunt. These characteristics proved entirely sufficient within the ecosystems of the Eocene. No rival required elaborate planning to overcome, and no coordinated hunting strategy was necessary when one animal already exceeded nearly every other predator sharing its waters. This balance endured for roughly 7 million years, a span exceeding the entire existence of many successful species that later evolved much larger brains. Evolution never rewards intelligence by itself. It favors whatever combination of traits allows an organism to survive and reproduce within its environment. During the age of Basilosaurus, immense size, formidable jaws, effective hearing, and relentless pursuit accomplished that task with extraordinary consistency. The oceans accepted those qualities as enough, and for millions of years they remained exactly that. The stage upon which Basilosaurus lived has disappeared so completely that it can only be reconstructed from stone, fossils, and the slow movements of continents. Its waters are absent from modern maps, its shorelines erased, and its currents long dispersed. During the late Eocene, however, the Tethys Sea formed one of the defining features of the planet, spreading across regions that today belong to several continents. It was not a smaller version of any modern ocean. It was a marine world with its own geography, climate, and ecological rhythm. The Tethys extended from the region now occupied by the Mediterranean basin, across the Middle East, and into southern Asia. Its broad, shallow waters connected countless coastlines and sheltered an immense variety of marine habitats. Earth itself presented a very different appearance from the familiar globe of the present day. India had not yet completed its collision with Asia, leaving the Himalayan mountains unborn. Antarctica still supported forests instead of continental ice. The continents continued their gradual migration, rearranging coastlines that would later become permanent features of the modern world. Global temperatures remained approximately 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than the average climate experienced today. Permanent polar ice caps had not yet formed, allowing warm conditions to extend across much of the planet. Within the Tethys Sea, surface waters remained consistently tropical throughout the year. Such stability encouraged extraordinary biological productivity. Energy flowed through food webs without the sharp seasonal interruptions common in many oceans today, supporting an abundance of life from the smallest plankton to the largest predators. Wide meadows of seagrass spread across shallow shelves, creating nurseries for countless young animals. Coral communities flourished in clear water where sunlight easily reached the seabed. Schools of fish gathered in tremendous numbers, feeding upon smaller organisms before becoming prey themselves. Sharks cruised these productive waters, while early whales explored every available niche. For a hunter such as Basilosaurus, opportunities appeared across nearly every level of the water column. Food remained plentiful enough to sustain an animal of exceptional size without demanding long migrations across freezing seas. This environment shaped every aspect of its anatomy. Thick layers of insulating blubber offered little advantage where warm water surrounded the body throughout the year. Long, flexible proportions suited coastal shelves and tropical bays where prey remained concentrated. The predator belonged completely to this setting, just as the setting belonged to the broader climate of the Eocene. Neither could have existed in quite the same form under the cooler conditions that later transformed the planet. Geological change gradually dismantled that kingdom. Africa continued drifting toward Europe while the Arabian landmass rotated northward. Ocean gateways narrowed, currents shifted, and the once continuous Tethys became divided into smaller basins. As millions of years passed, those fragments grew increasingly isolated until the Great Sea vanished altogether. The Mediterranean Sea survives as one remaining piece of that immense marine realm, preserving only a small reflection of the waters that once stretched across a far greater distance. The former floor of the Tethys now appears as desert plains, mountain ranges, limestone plateaus, and fossil-bearing rock layers. In Egypt, skeletons of Basilosaurus rest within stone that accumulated beneath warm coastal water roughly 40 million years ago. Dry winds now cross terrain where waves once rolled overhead, carrying grains of sand across places that were once visited by whales, sharks, and schools of fish. The kingdom itself has disappeared, yet its outline remains written across the land, preserved by geology long after the sea withdrew. Dominance can sometimes be measured by the distance an animal traveled across the world, rather than by the force of its bite. Basilosaurus was not represented by a single, isolated population living along one fortunate coastline. Fossil discoveries reveal two confirmed species occupying different reaches of the same warm marine realm at roughly the same point in Earth's history. Together, they illustrate a predator that expanded across an immense ocean, adapting to regional conditions while maintaining its place at the highest level of the food web. One species, Basilosaurus setoides, inhabited the warm coastal waters bordering what is now the Gulf Coast of the United States. Some estimates suggest individuals approached 20 meters, which is about 66 feet in length, making them among the largest mammals to appear after the extinction of the giant marine reptiles. fossils have been uncovered in remarkable abundance throughout Alabama, Mississippi, and neighboring regions. The bones became so familiar to early settlers that some were incorporated into household furniture, fences, and building materials, long before anyone recognized that they belonged to one of the greatest marine predators ever discovered. Far across the Tethys Sea lived Basilosaurus isis. Adults are generally measured between 15 meters, which is about 49 feet, and 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, in length. That statement would be incorrect. Adults instead reached between 15 meters, which is about 49 feet, and 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, extending through tropical waters that covered parts of present-day Egypt, North Africa, Jordan, and Pakistan. Fossils attributed to this species have appeared across a remarkably broad geographic range, and possible remains discovered in Antarctica suggest that its distribution may have extended even farther while the southern continent still supported a much warmer climate. Although the two species belong to the same genus, the prey available within their respective regions differed enough to shape their feeding habits. Fossil evidence indicates that Basilosaurus cetoides relied heavily upon fish and sharks, occupying productive coastal environments. Basilosaurus isis hunted many of those animals as well, yet preserved stomach contents and damaged skeletons demonstrate repeated attacks upon young Dorodon gathered within nursery grounds. Each species exploited the resources most abundant in its surroundings, while retaining the anatomical characteristics that defined the genus as a whole. This pattern resembles ecological specialization observed among living killer whales. Different populations occupying separate regions often develop distinct dietary preferences without becoming separate genera. Basilosaurus achieved something broadly comparable on a far larger geological stage. Instead of remaining restricted to one productive coastline, it spread across nearly the entire interconnected warm water system of the late Eocene, adjusting to local opportunities while preserving its role as the foremost marine hunter. Equally striking is the absence of any comparable rival. No other predatory whale of similar size occupied the same ecological position during this interval. Sharks remained formidable hunters, yet none approached the same combination of body length, jaw power, and ability to pursue large marine mammals. The oceans contained numerous predators, though none truly matched Basilosaurus in both scale and influence. Across tropical seas, it occupied a place without an equal. That position endured for approximately 7 million years. Generation followed generation, while coastlines shifted and marine communities evolved around a predator already established at the summit of its environment. Long before scientists reconstructed that remarkable history from scattered fossils, the enormous bones weathering from ancient rocks served ordinary purposes in nearby settlements. The remains of the ruler of a vanished ocean rested beneath chairs, along fences, and beside homes, their true identity waiting for another age to recognize the kingdom they once commanded. Recognition does not always arrive with discovery. Sometimes an extraordinary fossil can rest in plain sight for generations, its importance overlooked because familiarity disguises its true nature. That was the fate of Basilosaurus when its enormous bones first emerged from the ground in what is now Alabama during the early 19th century. Long before paleontology understood what these remains represented, people living across the American Gulf Coast had already found practical uses for them. The vertebrae were especially abundant. Large, hollow, and shaped with surprising regularity, they seemed well suited for ordinary construction. Farmers carried them from fields and stream banks, turning them into furniture legs, fence posts, and supports for small buildings. Across the countryside, pieces of the first great whale predator entered daily life as common household materials. The remains of an animal that had ruled a vanished sea became part of barns, tables, and property boundaries without anyone suspecting their remarkable origin. Scientific investigation began in the year 1832 when the American naturalist Richard Harlan examined several of these immense fossils. Their proportions appeared unlike anything known at the time. Believing the bones belonged to an enormous marine reptile, he estimated the animal had measured between 24 meters, which is about 79 feet, and 30 meters, which is about 98 feet, almost twice its actual length. Convinced he had identified a gigantic reptilian creature, he introduced the name Basilosaurus, meaning king lizard. The fossils soon reached the British anatomist Richard Owen, whose attention settled upon the teeth rather than the vertebrae. Their structure differed completely from the teeth of reptiles and fishes. Each molar possessed two distinct roots and a form characteristic of mammals. Owen recognized that the supposed giant reptile belonged instead to an early whale. He proposed replacing the original name with Zoglodon cetoides, believing the revised classification reflected the evidence far more accurately. Harlan accepted the correction, and many other scientists agreed that Owen's interpretation was the stronger one. One principle within zoological naming, however, outweighed scientific preference. The earliest published name retains priority, even if later research proves it misleading. Because Basilosaurus had already entered the scientific record, it could not be replaced. The title king lizard survived, despite describing an animal that was neither a king among reptiles nor a reptile at all. Every later discovery, every reconstructed skeleton, and every modern study has continued under that original name, preserving an error that became permanent through the rules of classification. Its reputation soon extended beyond scientific circles. In the novel Moby Dick, Herman Melville referred to Basilosaurus while describing stories from Alabama in which enslaved people regarded the gigantic bones as belonging to one of the fallen angels. Whether shared as folklore or literary imagery, the comparison reflected the impression created by remains so immense that familiar explanations seemed inadequate. Today, Basilosaurus holds official recognition as the state fossil of both Alabama and Mississippi. That designation honors an animal whose bones lay scattered across fields for decades before their significance became clear. The mistaken name, the improvised furniture, and the gradual recognition all reflected one deeper truth. Basilosaurus possessed a form so unusual that even experienced naturalists struggled to decide what kind of creature they were seeing, and that uncertainty arose from a body unlike anything living in the oceans today. Every fossil skeleton carries a recognizable outline, one that usually points toward a familiar, living relative. Basilosaurus resists that instinct. Even when nearly complete, its proportions seem to drift away from every modern comparison. The first scientists who studied it struggled to decide what kind of animal they were examining because no living creature offered an obvious reference. Its anatomy stood outside the patterns that shaped today's oceans, preserving a design that appeared only once in the history of whales. Modern whales concentrate tremendous power into compact bodies with broad horizontal tail flukes and relatively rigid trunks. Their streamlined form minimizes resistance as they cross immense stretches of open water. Basilosaurus followed a different path. Its body stretched to between 15 meters, which is about 49 feet, and 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, in overall length. That extraordinary elongation gave it an appearance unlike any whale swimming today. Instead of seeming compressed and muscular, it resembled an immense ribbon of living muscle flowing through warm seas. The resemblance to an eel reaches only so far. Eels belong to an entirely different branch of vertebrate life. They are fishes, their bodies supported by a fundamentally different skeletal design, moving side to side through lateral waves. Basilosaurus remained unmistakably a mammal. It breathed air, produced milk for its young, and propelled itself with the vertical motion inherited by every later whale. Its spine rose and fell instead of sweeping from side to side, creating movement that echoed modern cetaceans while preserving a silhouette that no surviving species has retained. That unusual motion depended upon one of the strangest vertebral structures ever discovered in a whale. The vertebrae were hollow and filled with fluid instead of being densely solid like those of modern relatives. This construction reduced stiffness and allowed the backbone to bend with exceptional freedom. Rather than behaving as a rigid beam transmitting force toward the tail, the spine functioned more like a flexible cable, distributing movement across much of the animal's remarkable length. Each swimming stroke rippled through the body with a flowing rhythm that fossil anatomy still reveals. Flexibility carried a price. Such an elongated frame probably sacrificed sustained cruising speed compared with the swift oceanic whales of the present. That compromise mattered little within the tropical waters of the Tethys Sea, where prey gathered in abundance across broad continental shelves. Rapid acceleration over short distances, sharp body bends, and powerful strikes likely offered greater rewards than efficient migration across cold oceans. Evolution shaped Basilosaurus for the environment surrounding it, not for seas that would emerge millions of years later. Researchers have occasionally described Basilosaurus as the closest a whale ever came to resembling a snake. The phrase captures the unusual impression left by its silhouette, although no serpent has ever approached its immense size or mammalian heritage. The comparison reflects movement more than ancestry, an attempt to describe something that slips beyond familiar categories. Every known living swimmer borrows only fragments of its design. That singular body plan endured for approximately 7 million years before disappearing forever. No later whale returned to such extreme proportions or recreated the same combination of elongated flexibility, powerful jaws, and mammalian physiology. Evolution explored this remarkable experiment once, then continued along another course, leaving Basilosaurus as the enduring record of a form that belonged entirely to its own vanished world. Embedded within that remarkable frame, one final anatomical reminder still revealed the distant land-dwelling ancestry from which every whale had begun. Some of the most revealing parts of Basilosaurus were also the least useful. Hidden along the rear portion of its immense body, far behind the powerful flippers and sweeping tail, rested a pair of hind legs that seemed to belong to another age. They were neither imagined nor reconstructed from fragments. Every well-preserved Basilosaurus skeleton has carried them, waiting in the rock as unmistakable reminders that this ruler of the Tethys Sea had descended from animals that once crossed solid ground. These were genuine limbs. They measured roughly 60 centimeters, which is about 2 feet, on an animal that reached as much as 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, in length. Each leg possessed a recognizable knee joint, an ankle, and distinct toe bones. At first glance, they appeared capable of movement, preserving the familiar arrangement expected in a walking mammal. Their proportions, however, told another story. Compared with the immense body surrounding them, they had become remarkably small, no longer matching the scale or purpose of the creature they accompanied. Closer examination revealed an even greater transformation. The pelvis supporting those limbs no longer connected directly to the vertebral column. Instead, it remained suspended within layers of muscle along the abdomen. Without a firm skeletal attachment, the legs could not bear the animal's weight on land. They also lacked the leverage needed to contribute meaningful thrust while swimming. They had ceased to participate in locomotion altogether, existing as anatomical remnants carried forward through millions of years of evolutionary change. Their continued presence suggests they had not become entirely without value. The leading scientific interpretation proposes that these limbs functioned during reproduction. Modern boa constrictors retain small pelvic spurs, themselves inherited from ancestors with fully developed legs. Those spurs help stabilize mating by providing points of contact between individuals. Basilosaurus may have relied upon its hind limbs in a similar manner, using structures inherited from terrestrial ancestors for an entirely different purpose within the sea. Evolution often reshapes existing anatomy instead of creating something entirely new. Among all discoveries supporting whale evolution, these limbs remain especially persuasive because they exist within the body of a fully marine predator. 15 million years had passed since the earliest members of this lineage began leaving the shoreline behind. During that immense span, flippers had replaced forelegs, the tail had become the primary engine of movement, and life on land had faded into distant ancestry. Yet the hind limbs endured, preserving physical evidence that no written record could ever equal. Natural selection rarely removes structures in a single step. It alters, reduces, and redirects them across countless generations. As long as a remaining feature carries little energetic cost or provides even a modest advantage, it may persist. Only after those balances change does further reduction continue. Basilosaurus occupied one moment within that gradual process, displaying both the future of whales and traces of their distant beginning in the same skeleton. There is a reflective quality in those modest limbs. They carried no burden across beaches and added no meaningful force to each swimming stroke, yet they remained attached to one of the greatest predators of the late Eocene world. The ocean had become its permanent home, while its body preserved an enduring memory of another landscape. Every other feature pressed toward a fully aquatic future, but those small legs continued to point, however faintly, toward the forgotten ground from which the whale lineage first emerged. Among every transformation that shaped the history of whales, one stands apart for its lasting influence. Teeth changed, skulls changed, senses grew more refined, and brains followed different paths across later lineages. Even so, none of those developments could have supported the immense bodies that would one day cross every ocean without the appearance of a broad horizontal tail fluke. In Basilosaurus, the fossil record preserves the oldest confirmed evidence that this defining feature had already become part of the whale body. Earlier whale ancestors moved through water by relying heavily on their hind feet. Their swimming resembled that of modern otters, with each stroke pushing against the water through powerful rear limbs. Such a method worked well for smaller animals, making the gradual transition from rivers and coastlines into marine habitats. As body size increased, however, that strategy approached its practical limit. Larger frames demanded a more efficient source of propulsion, one capable of moving tremendous weight through open water without exhausting the animal. Basilosaurus reveals that this transition had reached completion, although tiny hind legs still remained as evolutionary remnants. They no longer contributed to swimming. Propulsion came instead from the muscular tail, ending in a horizontal fluke that moved through strong vertical strokes. The backbone transmitted force from the torso into the tail, while the fluke pressed against the surrounding water with each downward and upward motion. That arrangement became the defining engine of every whale that followed, allowing power to increase alongside body size without sacrificing efficiency. This represented far more than another skeletal adjustment. Foot-driven swimming cannot easily support an animal measuring 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, across a tail-powered design can. With each movement concentrated at the rear of the body, the front remained comparatively streamlined, reducing resistance while allowing sustained travel through coastal seas and deeper passages alike. The enormous dimensions reached by Basilosaurus were inseparable from this new form of locomotion, which unlocked possibilities unavailable to its predecessors. Every living whale still depends upon that same fundamental solution. From the harbor porpoise to the blue whale, each species drives itself through the sea with a horizontal fluke powered by muscles running along the spine. Countless later adaptations appeared after Basilosaurus vanished, including more specialized feeding methods, increasingly capable sensory systems, and greater social complexity. Even so, all those innovations rested upon the same mechanical foundation established during this early chapter of whale evolution. Basilosaurus itself did not become the direct ancestor of modern whales. Its branch eventually ended, leaving no descendants to inherit its distinctive proportions. Other Archaeocete lineages survived the environmental changes that followed and continued evolving into the whales known today. They carried forward the same basic locomotor strategy, refining it across millions of years while abandoning features that Basilosaurus still retained. The horizontal fluke endured because it solved one of evolution's greatest engineering challenges with extraordinary effectiveness. Seen from that perspective, Basilosaurus resembles a successful demonstration whose influence reached well beyond its own existence. For approximately 7 million years, it proved that an immense mammal could dominate marine ecosystems using a body propelled almost entirely by its tail. Long after the animal itself disappeared, the principle remained. Every powerful stroke made by a modern whale still echoes that first successful design, preserving an innovation that permanently reshaped life in the world's oceans. Across millions of years, the fossil record preserves a striking pattern through what it does not reveal. Injuries from encounters with prey appear, tooth marks left after death appear, skeletons weathered by time appear. What never emerges is convincing evidence that any other predator regularly hunted healthy, adult Basilosaurus. For an animal living in such a competitive marine world, that absence carries unusual significance. It suggests a life spent beyond the reach of any comparable hunter. Large sharks already cruised the warm seas during the late Eocene. Some belonged to evolutionary branches that would eventually give rise to even more formidable descendants in later ages. They occupied an important place within marine food webs, feeding on fish, marine reptiles that still lingered in some regions, and smaller whales whenever the opportunity arose. Even so, available evidence places them below Basilosaurus in overall ecological influence. Their size and capabilities had not yet reached the level required to challenge a fully grown individual. Fossils preserve another detail with remarkable clarity. Teeth from Eocene sharks have been discovered embedded within the bones of Basilosaurus skeletons. Those marks tell a story. Though not the one first imagined by many observers, they were created after death, when the carcass had settled into the sea and scavengers arrived to feed. The distinction matters because scavenging reflects opportunity, while predation reflects dominance. Nothing presently known indicates that living adults regularly faced attacks from other apex hunters. Ecologists describe such circumstances as ecological release. In this condition, a predator experiences virtually no pressure from animals above it in the food chain. Population size becomes limited primarily by the availability of prey, suitable habitat, disease, and environmental change instead of constant competition from stronger hunters. Such arrangements are uncommon because ecosystems usually contain several powerful species competing for similar resources. Basilosaurus occupied one of those rare moments when the summit of the marine food web held only a single undisputed resident. Earth has witnessed comparable chapters before, although each looked different. The great marine reptiles that ruled before the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction once occupied a similarly commanding position. Modern killer whales approach that level in certain regions, yet they still share the sea with other formidable predators, including large sharks and sperm whales. Basilosaurus inhabited an ocean where no equivalent rival has been confirmed, leaving its ecological role unusually isolated. Its reign also endured for an astonishing span of time. Approximately 7 million years passed while Basilosaurus remained among the dominant hunters of warm marine environments. For comparison, the entire history of the human genus extends for only about 3 million years. The interval during which Basilosaurus retained its position exceeds twice the known duration of our own genus, stretching across changes in coastlines, climates, and generations beyond ordinary imagination. That longevity transformed Basilosaurus into more than a successful predator. It became one of the principal forces shaping marine ecosystems throughout much of the late Eocene. Countless populations of fish and smaller whales evolved under the constant influence of its presence, while scavengers benefited from the remains it occasionally left behind. Dominance on such a scale eventually ended, though not through defeat by another hunter. The greatest challenge arrived from changes unfolding across the planet itself, beyond the reach of even the ocean's most successful predator. No predator brought Basilosaurus to its end. Across millions of years, it had mastered an ocean shaped for its strengths, where warm seas stretched across much of the planet and food remained abundant through long spans of geological time. The change that finally overcame it began far beyond its hunting grounds, driven by drifting continents that slowly rearranged the circulation of the entire world. For countless generations, Antarctica remained connected closely enough to neighboring land masses that warm currents reached its shores. As Australia gradually separated, a broad marine passage eventually opened between them. Around 34 million years ago, seawater gained an uninterrupted route around the southern continent. This new flow, known as the Circumantarctic Current, circled Antarctica without meeting a continental barrier, carrying cold water around the pole and isolating the continent from tropical warmth. The consequences spread far beyond the southern latitudes. Antarctica accumulated lasting ice across its land for the first time in many millions of years. As the growing ice sheets reflected more sunlight back into space, the planet cooled further. Dense, oxygen-rich water formed near the pole, descended into the deep ocean, and altered circulation patterns that had remained familiar throughout much of the late Eocene. Even regions thousands of kilometers away, which is about 1,864 miles, experienced changing currents, shifting temperatures, and new seasonal rhythms. The Tethys Sea, once defined by dependable warmth, entered a different chapter. Water temperatures declined, tropical habitats contracted, and shallow marine shelves no longer supported the same communities that had flourished before. Fish populations redistributed into new environments. Marine mammals adapted in different ways or disappeared from familiar coastlines. Ecological relationships that had endured across immense spans of time were gradually rewritten as each species responded according to its own limits. Basilosaurus had evolved for a greenhouse world. Its immense body, feeding habits, and broad distribution reflected conditions that had persisted long enough to seem permanent from the perspective of any living creature. Evolution, however, follows environments that continue changing, not those that remain familiar. Adaptations perfected for one world may offer little advantage once the foundations of that world begin to shift. The fossil record captures this turning point with striking clarity. Basilosaurus remains are abundant within rocks, dating to the Preiobonian stage of the late Eocene. Above the boundary marking the beginning of the Oligocene, confirmed fossils disappear. On the geological timescale, the transition appears remarkably swift. The animal that had dominated warm oceans across millions of years left no verified record beyond that dividing line. Its disappearance was part of a broader transformation rather than an isolated event. Many organisms dependent upon stable tropical seas also declined as climates cooled and marine ecosystems reorganized. New whale lineages possessing different proportions, different feeding strategies, and different ecological opportunities continued forward into the changing oceans. Basilosaurus belonged completely to the world that had shaped it, and when that world faded, its long reign ended with it, preserved only in stone beneath landscapes that no longer resemble the sea it once ruled. Dominance often leaves an expectation of permanence. A lineage spreads, adapts, and divides into new forms that inherit pieces of the original design. Across the history of life, successful groups commonly scatter their legacy through countless descendants, each carrying familiar traits into changing worlds. Basilosaurus followed a different path. Its reign endured for millions of years, yet when its chapter closed, its own branch ended with it. The family to which Basilosaurus belonged disappeared during the transition between the Eocene and Oligocene. Every known member of that family vanished from the fossil record. No surviving population endured in an isolated sea. No smaller descendant adapted to cooler conditions. No later whale carried forward the distinctive combination of its elongated body, exceptional spinal flexibility, specialized teeth, and reduced hind limbs. The branch ended completely, preserved only in stone. Modern whales trace their ancestry through another line of early whales that shared distant common origins, but followed a separate evolutionary course. Baleen whales, including the blue whale and humpback whale, emerged from ancestors outside the basilosaurid family. The same is true for toothed whales, such as sperm whales, dolphins, killer whales, and porpoises. Those animals inherited different anatomical refinements that proved more successful as oceans cooled and marine ecosystems reorganized after the close of the Eocene. This distinction matters because Basilosaurus often appears to occupy the role of direct ancestor in the imagination. Its place near the beginning of fully aquatic whale evolution makes that assumption understandable. Fossils tell another story. Basilosaurus stood beside the lineage that ultimately produced living whales, not at the base of it. Both branches emerged from earlier whale ancestors, flourished during overlapping intervals, and experienced the same changing planet through different evolutionary possibilities. Its disappearance therefore represents more than the extinction of a single species. An entire experiment in whale evolution came to an end. Evolution rarely follows a straight road. It sends many branches outward, each exploring different solutions to survival. Some continue across immense stretches of time. Others achieve extraordinary success before ending without successors. Basilosaurus belongs to that second pattern, remarkable for the scale of its triumph and equally remarkable for the completeness of its disappearance. Nothing living today swims with its distinctive proportions. No modern predator combines such an elongated body with the same skeletal architecture or feeding strategy. The peculiar flexibility of its vertebral column, the unusual arrangement of its hind limbs, and its solitary style of hunting vanished together. The ocean retained no direct biological continuation of those characteristics. Even so, extinction did not erase its place within the larger history of whales. Basilosaurus demonstrated that mammals could become permanent rulers of the sea, reaching immense size while living entirely in water. It occupied that role for millions of years before environmental change reshaped the planet. Although its own lineage reached a final end, the broader story of whale evolution continued through neighboring branches that met the changing oceans with different adaptations. In that sense, Basilosaurus became one of evolution's great completed chapters, immense in influence, complete in itself, and remembered through fossils that preserve the outline of a world that no longer exists. Some stories leave descendants, others leave consequences. Basilosaurus belongs to the second kind. Its own lineage disappeared completely, yet the influence of its existence may have extended far beyond the final fossil. The animal itself vanished, but the evolutionary pressures it imposed continued shaping the lives of creatures that survived into a different world. Across roughly 7 million years, Basilosaurus occupied the highest level of its marine ecosystem. Among its regular prey were smaller, early whales, including Dorodon and closely related forms. Fossil discoveries preserving juvenile whale remains within the stomach contents of Basilosaurus reveal that young individuals were frequent targets. Such selective predation carried consequences extending beyond individual hunts. Generation after generation, the animals most capable of avoiding danger gained greater opportunities to survive and reproduce. Natural selection responds to persistent challenges with remarkable patience. A powerful predator does more than reduce prey numbers. It changes which traits become valuable. Greater awareness of surrounding waters, quicker reactions, stronger swimming ability, and improved coordination among related individuals all become advantages when survival depends upon escaping an experienced hunter. Across immense spans of time, these small advantages accumulate, gradually reshaping an entire lineage. During the closing chapters of the Eocene, the ancestors of modern toothed whales were already following their own evolutionary path. They did not arise after Basilosaurus disappeared. They lived alongside it, sharing the same seas while facing the constant possibility of becoming prey. Their nervous systems, sensory abilities, and patterns of social interaction were evolving within an environment where avoiding large marine predators carried tremendous importance. The enlarged brains that characterize living dolphins, sperm whales, killer whales, and their relatives appeared through countless incremental changes rather than a single dramatic leap. Complex communication, coordinated movement, extended parental care, and increasingly sophisticated perception all offered survival benefits within demanding ecosystems. Echolocation would emerge later, after the Eocene, Yet the neurological foundations supporting advanced cognition had already begun developing through millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Predation formed one important part of that selective landscape, even if many environmental influences acted together. It would be misleading to claim that Basilosaurus alone created the intelligence of modern whales. Evolution almost never has a single cause. Climate shifts, changing oceans, competition, food availability, and countless ecological interactions all contributed to the outcome. Even so, the presence of an exceptionally capable apex predator almost certainly influenced the direction of those adaptations. Every successful escape, every cautious mother, every calf that learned danger a little sooner became part of a continuing evolutionary conversation written across generations. That creates one of the most compelling ironies in the history of marine life. Basilosaurus left no descendants to inherit its remarkable body. The branch ended completely. Yet the whales that eventually filled the oceans may still carry traces of the selective pressures it imposed. Their intelligence, flexible behavior, and increasingly cooperative lives developed in seas where survival often depended upon responding to predators of extraordinary effectiveness. The predator disappeared, the prey endured. Through that reversal, the influence of Basilosaurus continued without preserving a single strand of its own lineage. Its body became extinct, while the evolutionary questions it asked remained woven into the descendants of those that escaped, carrying the memory of an ancient hunter into oceans that would never see its equal again. The waters that followed the disappearance of Basilosaurus were shaped by an entirely different rhythm. Cooling currents spread across the planet, carrying more than lower temperatures. They transformed the chemistry of the sea itself, opening ecological opportunities that had scarcely existed during the warm Eocene. An extinction had closed one chapter, yet the altered ocean began composing another with remarkable speed. Cold seawater can hold substantially more dissolved oxygen than warm seawater. As the circum-Antarctic current strengthened around the frozen southern continent, deep water, rich in nutrients, circulated upward into sunlit surface layers across many regions of the world. This process, known as upwelling, carried nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential elements from the depths to places where microscopic algae could flourish. Those tiny drifting organisms multiplied in extraordinary abundance, capturing sunlight and forming the foundation of increasingly productive marine food webs. Each bloom supported countless grazing animals. Krill became especially successful within these nutrient-rich waters, gathering in immense swarms that stretched for extraordinary distances. Fish, seabirds, seals, and many other creatures benefited from this expanding supply of food. The oceans no longer depended chiefly upon warm tropical shallows for biological richness. Productivity spread into colder regions where continuous circulation refreshed surface waters with nutrients drawn upward from far below. Such abundance rewarded a feeding strategy unlike anything that had dominated the earlier seas. Instead of pursuing individual prey, some whales began exploiting enormous concentrations of tiny organisms. Thin plates of keratin gradually replaced functional teeth in certain lineages, creating the filtering structure known as baleen. Water entered the mouth, escaped through these flexible plates, and left prey trapped behind. The earliest baleen whales emerged during the Oligocene, adapting to an ocean whose new circulation patterns supplied food on an unprecedented scale. A modern blue whale demonstrates the astonishing potential of that innovation. During periods of intense feeding, it may consume about 40 million krill in a single day. Such a lifestyle would have been difficult to sustain in the warmer Eocene seas, where nutrients remained more unevenly distributed. The reorganized ocean created conditions that rewarded immense size, supported by efficient filter feeding rather than constant pursuit of large prey. At the same time, the ancestors of modern toothed whales continued refining another solution. Their brains expanded further. Specialized forehead structures known as the melon developed, helping focus sound during echolocation. Sophisticated acoustic perception allowed these animals to navigate dark water, coordinate with companions, and locate prey beyond the reach of vision alone. Social complexity and advanced communication became increasingly valuable within diverse marine environments that extended far beyond sheltered coastal habitats. Placed beside one another, these outcomes reveal two remarkably different answers to the same evolutionary challenge. The warm Eocene favored Basilosaurus, a solitary predator whose long body and formidable jaws matched the conditions of shallow tropical seas. The cooler Oligocene encouraged whales capable of filtering immense quantities of food or cooperating through intelligence, sound, and social bonds across oceans transformed by persistent circulation. One planetary climate shift separated those worlds. The same environmental change that erased an unmatched apex hunter also created the ecological stage upon which modern whales would flourish. The ocean did not become poorer after Basilosaurus disappeared. It became different, and from that difference emerged forms of life whose success continues across the seas today. There are fossils that answer old mysteries, and there are fossils that leave a different kind of inheritance. Basilosaurus belongs to the second group. After every measurement has been taken and every bone compared, one thought remains. What does it truly mean for a species to stand at the summit of life if nothing of that form continues into the future? Measured by the standards of its own age, Basilosaurus achieved a level of success that few animals have ever matched. It grew into one of the largest predators the world had yet produced. It completed the transition from land to sea more fully than any whale before it. It carried the earliest confirmed tail flukes, mastered fully aquatic life, and remained without a confirmed natural enemy for approximately 7 million years. Across the warm Eocene oceans, it occupied the highest ecological position available, shaping entire communities through its presence alone. Even so, the living oceans reveal a different picture of success. The blue whale has abandoned the role of hunter altogether. Instead, it gathers astonishing numbers of tiny animals with baleen, transforming immense blooms of marine life into one of the greatest bodies ever produced by evolution. Sperm whales travel into darkness, reaching 3 kilometers, that is nearly 2 miles, below the surface, using remarkable perception and communication to pursue prey that Basilosaurus would never have encountered. Dolphins and killer whales cooperate through intricate social bonds that emerged across countless generations of changing environments. Placed beside these descendants of neighboring evolutionary branches, Basilosaurus can appear almost unfamiliar. Its long body, solitary habits, and powerful jaws reflected the demands of an ocean that no longer exists. That difference does not make it less of a whale. It makes it the expression of a world whose conditions selected for an entirely different way of living. The temptation is to imagine evolution as a steady climb toward intelligence, cooperation, or increasing complexity. The fossil record offers a different lesson. Evolution has no destination waiting ahead. It does not anticipate future climates or reward qualities that may become useful millions of years later. Each generation succeeds, or fails within the circumstances surrounding it at that moment. Basilosaurus fit the Eocene with extraordinary precision. When the planet changed, those same strengths no longer matched the sea that replaced it. Its disappearance, therefore, carries an unexpected perspective on biological achievement. Dominance alone cannot guarantee endurance. Great size cannot preserve a lineage through changing climates. Perfect adaptation remains perfect only while the environment that shaped it continues to exist. Once that setting vanishes, even the most successful design may become part of the geological record instead of the living world. The whales alive today should not be viewed as improved versions of Basilosaurus. They answer different ecological demands posed by colder oceans, shifting food webs, and new opportunities. Their intelligence, migration, communication, and feeding strategies belong to an Earth transformed by forces that arrived after Basilosaurus had already reached its conclusion. Perhaps that is the enduring question resting within those remarkable fossils. Success in evolution is measured neither by power alone nor by permanence alone. Every species becomes the answer to the world that created it. Basilosaurus answered the Eocene completely, and when the question itself changed, the ocean began writing a different answer with entirely different whales. Nothing prepares the mind for the first encounter with Wadi Al-Hitan. Pale limestone stretches across the horizon beneath an open sky. Fine sand drifts around weathered ridges. The air carries only the scent of dry earth, while every direction suggests a landscape that has belonged to the desert for an immeasurable span. Then, resting within the stone at your feet, lies the complete outline of a whale that once ruled an ocean. The contrast feels almost impossible, yet it reflects one of Earth's greatest transformations. The desert did not replace the sea in a sudden catastrophe. The sea itself became the desert through tens of millions of years of shifting continents, changing climates, and relentless geological motion. Every layer of rock preserves another chapter of that gradual change, allowing the former floor of the Tethys Ocean to remain visible long after its waters disappeared. When Basilosaurus died, its body settled onto soft marine sediment, rich with fine particles carried through warm coastal waters. Scavengers removed flesh, currents arranged loose bones, and fresh layers of sediment slowly covered what remained. Burial protected the skeleton from waves and weather before minerals dissolved through the surrounding ground. Atom by atom, those minerals entered the bones, replacing their original structure while preserving their form. During approximately 40 million years, the skeleton became stone, and the soft seafloor hardened into limestone. Earth itself never stopped moving. Tectonic forces gradually lifted this ancient seabed above sea level. Rain, wind, and changing temperatures wore away the rock that once buried the fossils. Layer after layer disappeared until skeletons that had rested in darkness for millions of centuries returned to daylight. Their appearance seems almost deliberate, although it emerged from countless ordinary geological processes acting together across immense stretches of time. That extraordinary combination of circumstances makes the Valley of the Whales one of the most remarkable fossil sites on the planet. Burial occurred at the proper depth. Sediment chemistry favored preservation instead of decay. Uplift exposed the rock without destroying the skeletons inside. Erosion removed just enough stone to reveal ancient lives while leaving much of each fossil intact. A small change in any one of those conditions could have erased nearly every trace of Basilosaurus before human beings ever existed. Approximately 1,000 whale specimens have been identified throughout this landscape. Only a small number rest beside the walking paths, allowing visitors to follow the outlines of creatures exactly where they came to rest. Among them lies the largest complete Basilosaurus skeleton ever discovered, stretching about 18 meters, which is about 59 feet, across the limestone. Its vertebrae, ribs, skull, and tail remain arranged with remarkable completeness, preserving the final position of an animal that once crossed the Eocene Sea. The fossils themselves are perfectly at home. They have never truly left the place where their story ended. Human visitors are the newcomers, arriving tens of millions of years after the ocean vanished. Standing above those bones means standing on an ancient seafloor, surrounded by the remains of a vanished ecosystem whose ruler still rests exactly where Earth chose to keep its memory, waiting within stone until time uncovered it once again. Some ideas can be understood with perfect clarity while remaining almost impossible to experience in the imagination. Deep time belongs to that strange category. A date such as 66 million years ago settles comfortably into the mind, alongside 41 million years ago, or 33.9 million years ago. The figures are easy to read, yet they resist every instinct the human brain possesses for measuring lived experience. Human memory evolved around seasons, generations, and lifetimes. Even the longest family histories reach back only a handful of centuries before dissolving into uncertainty. Stretch that scale to 10,000 years, and it already feels almost unreachable. Extend it to millions of years, and ordinary intuition loses its footing completely. Time no longer resembles a road leading into the past. It becomes an expanse with almost no familiar landmarks. The entire story of civilization, from the earliest cities in Mesopotamia through every kingdom, empire, discovery, and modern nation, occupies roughly 10,000 years. Basilosaurus persisted for about 7 million years, surviving through a span equivalent to approximately 700 complete histories of civilization, placed one after another. Every written language, every monument, every library, and every generation of human achievement would fit inside only a tiny fraction of that immense interval. Another comparison carries an even greater surprise. The final non-avian dinosaurs disappeared approximately 66 million years ago. Basilosaurus appeared around 41 million years ago. That separation amounts to roughly 25 million years. The distance between Basilosaurus and the present is noticeably shorter. In pure chronology, humanity stands closer to Basilosaurus than Basilosaurus ever stood to Tyrannosaurus rex. Those two creatures often seem like neighbors in popular imagination, although they were divided by an interval far exceeding the age of many entire mountain ranges. Chronology alone tells only part of the story. The planet inhabited by Basilosaurus would have appeared unfamiliar even if someone could step across those millions of years in a single moment. The Tethys Ocean spread across regions that no longer contain open sea. Antarctica supported no great continental ice sheet. Ocean currents followed different paths, carrying heat in patterns unlike those shaping the modern climate. Coastlines bore little resemblance to today's maps, and ecosystems assembled themselves according to conditions that no longer exist. That realization changes the meaning of deep time. It is more than an immense duration. Each interval carries its own atmosphere, geography, chemistry, and web of life. The rules governing one age may hold little resemblance to those guiding the next. Basilosaurus occupied an Earth that shared the same planet beneath the sky, yet almost every environmental framework surrounding it belonged to another version of the world. The fossils preserved within the Egyptian desert offer an unusual kind of correspondence across that distance. They are not relics from humanity's distant childhood, nor fragments of a story leading inevitably toward the present. They resemble messages carried across tens of millions of years by stone itself. Mineralized bone, preserved through extraordinary geological fortune, records the existence of an ocean, a predator, and an entire living world that vanished long before our own appeared. Reading those remains means listening across a gulf so immense that ordinary memory cannot contain it, while Earth, patient as ever, continues holding every chapter within its layered stone. Language has a way of making extraordinary things seem ordinary. The word fossil sounds clinical, almost routine, as though it refers to nothing more than an object resting behind museum glass. Its origin traces back to the Latin word, meaning something dug from the ground. That definition is accurate, yet it captures almost none of the astonishing reality held within the stone. A fossil is the continued presence of a life that once occupied a particular place at a particular moment. It is far more than an impression or an imitation. In many cases, the original hard tissues remain long enough for mineral-rich groundwater to move through them. Across immense spans of time, atom after atom of the original material is replaced by minerals such as silica, calcite, or iron compounds. The living bone gradually surrenders its substance while preserving its form. Shape survives even as composition changes, creating an object that still carries the exact architecture of the creature from which it came. That transformation unfolds at a pace almost impossible to imagine. Layer after layer of sediment settles above the remains. Pressure increases across millions of years. Chemical reactions continue without interruption, guided by groundwater, surrounding rock, and the minerals dissolved within it. Nothing about the process is hurried. Every stage belongs to geological rhythms measured across intervals that far exceed the lifespan of entire species. When researchers uncovered one remarkable Basilosaurus skeleton at Wadi Al-Hitan during the second decade of the 21st century, they touched a body that had rested in essentially the same position since roughly 40 million years before the first human appeared. Those bones began their long mineral journey before the Himalayan mountains reached their modern heights. They entered the sediment before Antarctica became the frozen continent familiar today. The hands that uncovered them belonged to a civilization unimaginably distant from the world that produced them, yet the physical connection remained unbroken. Other discoveries preserve moments even more specific. Deep marks carved into the skulls of juvenile Dorodon individuals match the teeth of Basilosaurus with striking precision. Those grooves are not artistic reconstructions or symbolic reminders of ancient hunts. They are the original injuries, preserved through mineral replacement, carrying forward the evidence of individual encounters that unfolded in the Eocene Sea. A single bite became part of the geological record. The same holds true for the young Dorodon remains discovered inside the body cavity of one Basilosaurus specimen. Those bones represent the final meal of a particular predator on a particular day. Digestion had already begun before burial interrupted the ordinary cycle of decay. Sediment covered the carcass, chemistry took over, and an ordinary act of feeding crossed 40 million years to reach the present without losing its identity. People often imagine the past as something erased forever, existing only in memory or imagination. The rocks suggest another possibility. Under favorable conditions, the past can endure with astonishing fidelity, waiting until erosion, uplift, and patient investigation reveal it once again. Basilosaurus, its prey, its final meals, and even the traces of its hunting remain accessible because Earth preserved events instead of allowing them to disappear completely. The story exists because the world itself became its archive, holding each chapter until another age arrived capable of reading the stone. Some names survive because they are correct. Others survive because they capture an impression too powerful to erase. Basilosaurus belongs to the second kind. Long after scientists understood that it was a whale rather than a reptile, the old name remained. It continues to accompany every skeleton, every scientific paper, and every conversation about this remarkable animal, carrying forward a mistake that somehow still conveys part of its character. The original discoverers encountered bones unlike anything they expected. Their size suggested a creature beyond familiar experience. Their elongated proportions recalled giant reptiles known from earlier discoveries. Working with the evidence available during the early 19th century, they concluded they had uncovered an immense marine lizard and named it accordingly. Later research revealed ear bones, teeth, and many other anatomical features belonging unmistakably to a mammal. By then, the scientific name had become established, and the rules governing zoological names favored stability over correction. The title remained, even after its literal meaning had become outdated. Across nearly 2 centuries, people approaching Basilosaurus from very different backgrounds have reached remarkably similar reactions. Farmers in Alabama once uncovered enormous fossil bones while working the land and even incorporated some into everyday objects before their significance became known. Local stories gave the remains supernatural origins. Early naturalists saw a colossal reptile. Modern paleontologists recognize an early whale. Every generation has interpreted the evidence through the language available to it, yet each has paused before the same overwhelming sense that this animal stood apart from ordinary experience. Its body encouraged that response. Basilosaurus possessed unmistakable mammalian traits, including breathing air, nursing its young, and giving birth to fully formed calves in the water. At the same time, its long jaws, narrow skull, serpentine body, and tiny external hind limbs created an appearance unlike any whale alive today. It represented a stage in whale evolution that no longer exists, preserving features inherited from terrestrial ancestors while displaying adaptations that committed it completely to marine life. That combination often invites the description of a transitional form, yet the phrase can be misunderstood. Basilosaurus was not an incomplete experiment waiting to become something else. It functioned with extraordinary success within the world that produced it. For approximately 7 million years, it occupied the highest predatory position in warm Eocene seas, shaping entire marine communities while facing no confirmed natural predator as a healthy adult. Its anatomy was precisely suited to that ecological setting, even though later whales followed different evolutionary paths. The title king lizard therefore contains an unexpected irony. The second word misidentifies its biological relationships, but the first reflects its ecological role with surprising accuracy. Basilosaurus dominated an ocean, unlike any that exists today, becoming the defining predator of its age. It stood alone within a combination of size, power, evolutionary novelty, and environmental opportunity that has rarely appeared elsewhere in Earth's history. Names often reveal as much about those who create them as about the creatures they describe. Basilosaurus reminds us that understanding grows by revision, while wonder often arrives first. The incorrect name endured because the first observers recognized something genuine before they understood exactly what they had found. They knew they were looking at an animal that stretched beyond familiar categories, And after all the discoveries that followed, that first impression still remains remarkably difficult to improve. Some branches of evolution resemble broad rivers, dividing into countless streams that continue long after the original current has disappeared. Others resemble a single path across open ground, appearing once, traveling a remarkable distance, and ending without another footprint to follow. Basilosaurus belonged to that rarer pattern, occupying a place in life's history that existed only once and has never been repeated. It marked several beginnings at the same time. Basilosaurus stands as the earliest fully aquatic whale presently known, having abandoned every practical connection to life on land. It possessed powerful tail flukes that supplied efficient propulsion through open water, confirming a swimming style recognizable in living whales. Fossil evidence preserving stomach contents also offers the earliest direct record of feeding behavior in whale evolution, allowing paleontologists to examine not only its anatomy, but also the prey it actually consumed. In the oceans that followed the disappearance of the great marine reptiles, Basilosaurus also became the dominant predator of its age, occupying the highest ecological position across much of the warm Eocene seas. Its achievements make the ending even more striking. The Basilosaurid family disappeared completely near the boundary between the Eocene and Oligocene epochs. No surviving branch continued its distinctive body plan. No descendant carried forward its elongated proportions, its hunting strategy, or its combination of anatomical features. The wider group of early whales continued through different lineages, eventually giving rise to the baleen whales and toothed whales familiar today. Yet, Basilosaurus itself reached an evolutionary conclusion without leaving a direct continuation. Being first often suggests the opening chapter of a long dynasty. Basilosaurus followed another course. It demonstrated one successful solution to the challenge of becoming a whale, flourishing for approximately 7 million years, while the conditions that favored it remained stable. During that interval, warm oceans, abundant prey, and a greenhouse climate supported its way of life with extraordinary consistency. When those environmental foundations shifted, the path that Basilosaurus represented ended alongside them. Its disappearance did not result from gradual replacement by a superior predator. No rival evolved that steadily displaced it across the oceans. Instead, the world changed around it. Cooling seas, altered circulation patterns, and reorganized marine ecosystems reshaped the opportunities available to every organism living within them. Species able to exploit the emerging conditions continued their evolutionary journeys. Basilosaurus belonged completely to the earlier world, carrying adaptations refined for an environment that no longer existed. That singularity gives Basilosaurus a distinctive place in Earth's history. There has been only one animal combining exactly those characteristics, living within exactly those environmental circumstances, across exactly that interval of geological time. Every defining feature depended upon countless events aligning together. Continental positions, ocean temperatures, prey communities, climate stability, and evolutionary inheritance combined to create a creature perfectly matched to one fleeting chapter of planetary history. Once those circumstances vanished, no later age reconstructed the same combination. Looking across the immense span of whale evolution, Basilosaurus appears neither as a primitive draft nor as a failed experiment. It stands instead as a complete expression of one possibility among many that evolution explored. Its story began with remarkable innovation and concluded with equal finality, leaving behind fossils that preserve the memory of a form unlike any before or after it. Between those two boundaries lies the entire existence of a creature that was simultaneously the beginning of one extraordinary chapter and the ending of another. Viewed across the full sweep of its history, Basilosaurus becomes part of a pattern much larger than any single species. Its beginning, its dominance, and its disappearance all emerged from events that transformed the living world on a planetary scale. Each turning point carried immense loss, yet each also created opportunities that had never existed before. The same forces that erased one community prepared the foundation for another. The great asteroid impact that ended the age of the non-avian dinosaurs stands among the clearest examples. Entire ecosystems collapsed as darkness spread through the atmosphere, food webs unraveled, and countless species vanished forever. Those disappearances reshaped every continent and every ocean. Ecological roles that had been occupied for millions of years suddenly stood empty. Mammals, once limited largely to smaller forms living alongside dominant reptiles, encountered a planet filled with possibilities that had not previously been available. Within that transformed world, one lineage gradually explored rivers, estuaries, and coastal waters. Those early mammals did not move toward the sea with foresight or intention. Each generation responded only to the conditions surrounding it. Waters rich in food rewarded individuals capable of swimming farther, hunting more effectively, and spending increasing portions of life away from land. Across millions of years, those accumulated changes produced animals whose descendants eventually became Basilosaurus, fully committed to an existence in the open ocean. For approximately 7 million years, that solution matched its environment with remarkable precision. Warm seas, extensive shallow habitats, and abundant prey sustained one of the most successful marine predators Earth has known. Yet the stability supporting that success depended upon climatic conditions that would not endure indefinitely. Continental movement altered ocean circulation. Antarctica entered a new phase of glaciation, and marine ecosystems reorganized around colder, more productive waters. The same planetary processes that ended Basilosaurus also opened ecological pathways unavailable within the earlier greenhouse world. Those new oceans favored entirely different strategies for survival. Dense concentrations of microscopic life supported enormous populations of krill and other small animals. Filter feeding became increasingly advantageous, allowing baleen whales to exploit food resources beyond the reach of earlier predators. At the same time, toothed whales expanded along another evolutionary route, refining sophisticated hearing, social cooperation, and echolocation until they occupied ecological roles, unlike anything seen during the Eocene. Neither path replaced Basilosaurus directly. Both arose because the world itself had changed. From that perspective, catastrophe and creation become different views of the same geological event. A transformation that appears devastating from the standpoint of one lineage may represent extraordinary opportunity for another. The extinction that cleared ecological space after the dinosaurs ultimately benefited mammals. The climatic transition that ended Basilosaurus helped shape the conditions under which modern whales diversified. Every ending altered the possibilities available to whatever survived. No larger destination guides this process. Evolution does not advance according to a predetermined plan, nor does it consistently favor greater intelligence, larger bodies, or increasing complexity. Life responds to opportunity wherever opportunity appears, filling available spaces with forms suited to present conditions until those conditions change once more. Basilosaurus flourished because one world existed. Baleen whales and toothed whales flourished because another world followed. Each belonged completely to its own time, Each reflected the planet that shaped it, and each chapter emerged from transformations that first seemed defined only by loss. There comes a point in every long history when the search for beginnings and endings gives way to something quieter, though no less profound. Basilosaurus no longer stands only as a chapter in the evolution of whales. It becomes an entire world expressed through a single animal, one life shaped so completely by its surroundings that separating the creature from its age becomes almost impossible. For approximately 7 million years, Basilosaurus occupied that place with extraordinary certainty. It crossed warm waters that stretched across the Tethys Sea, followed breeding grounds where young whales entered the world, and rose to breathe beneath skies arranged in patterns unfamiliar to modern eyes. No polar ice reflected sunlight from either end of the planet. Ocean currents followed routes unlike those of today. Continents rested in different positions, and coastlines belonged to landscapes that have long since disappeared beneath newer layers of Earth. Every breath belonged to a planet that has no modern equivalent. Nothing within that existence carried any awareness of historical importance. Basilosaurus did not recognize itself as the earliest fully aquatic whale. It could not perceive that its body represented one solution among countless possibilities explored by evolution. The forces guiding its life remained immediate: finding food, avoiding injury, reproducing successfully, and surviving another season within the environment that had shaped every feature of its anatomy. Across those millions of years, its distinctive form remained remarkably complete. Hollow vertebrae gave flexibility to its elongated body. Tiny hind limbs persisted as reminders of distant terrestrial ancestry while contributing little to swimming. Powerful jaws closed around prey with exceptional force, and broad tail flukes drove steady movement through open water. When climatic transformation finally arrived, none of those remarkable features continued into another lineage. The body plan that had served so well belonged entirely to Basilosaurus and disappeared with it at the boundary between the Eocene and Oligocene. From a human perspective, that ending can appear unusually final. We often search for descendants, lasting influence, or recognizable inheritance as measures of success. Evolution does not depend upon those ideas. Every species exists within the circumstances available to it, responding to conditions that exist only for a particular span of time. Basilosaurus neither succeeded nor failed according to standards that emerged millions of years after its disappearance. It fulfilled every demand placed upon it by the world that produced it. That realization offers a different way of understanding its place within natural history. Basilosaurus was never an unfinished draft awaiting improvement. It was not an awkward transition struggling toward modern whales, nor an evolutionary mistake destined for replacement. During the interval that sustained it, every part of its biology matched the opportunities surrounding it with remarkable precision. Predator and environment belonged together, each helping define the other across an ocean that supported both. When that world finally changed, Basilosaurus departed with it. Its disappearance marked the close of one complete expression of life, while leaving room for entirely different expressions to emerge. The measure of its existence, therefore, rests neither in descendants nor in permanence. It rests in the rare completeness of an animal that matched its moment so perfectly that, for as long as that moment endured, nothing more was required. Basilosaurus was enough, entirely and without qualification, for the only world it was ever meant to inhabit. No kingdom lasts forever, yet the sea itself has never belonged to any single ruler. Long after the final Basilosaurus disappeared from the warming light above the Eocene waters, The currents continued their patient movement, carrying nutrients, shaping coastlines, and offering new opportunities to whatever life could answer them. The Tethys Sea vanished through the slow work of drifting continents. The greenhouse world faded. Basilosaurus passed beyond recovery, leaving no direct descendant to inherit its remarkable form. Even so, the ocean remained, endlessly reshaping itself while life continued to respond. The waters that followed became colder, richer in dissolved oxygen, and filled with immense blooms of microscopic life. From those changing conditions arose whales unlike any that had existed before. Baleen whales evolved filtering structures of keratin that allowed them to harvest astonishing quantities of tiny prey. A blue whale can consume roughly the mass of an elephant in krill during a single day when feeding conditions are favorable. Elsewhere, toothed whales followed another path, developing greater social awareness, enlarged brains, refined hearing, and sophisticated sound-based navigation that transformed darkness into a landscape rich with information. Among them appeared sperm whales, carrying the largest brains known in any animal, weighing around 9 kilograms, which is about 20 pounds. Dolphins formed communities that recognized individuals, shared knowledge across generations, cared for injured companions, and expressed playful behavior throughout their lives. Killer whales developed family traditions that differed from one population to another, preserving distinctive hunting methods and vocal patterns through learning instead of instinct alone. None of these creatures inherited the body of Basilosaurus. They inherited only the possibility opened when mammals first committed themselves completely to the sea. Their existence reveals something subtle about evolution. Every generation answers the conditions surrounding it, never anticipating what another age may require. Basilosaurus offered one complete solution to the challenges presented by the Eocene ocean. Strength, size, powerful jaws, and solitary mastery suited that world with remarkable precision. When the environment transformed, those qualities no longer matched the changing currents, expanding food webs, and colder waters. Different answers emerged because the questions themselves had changed. Seen across deep time, the history of whales resembles a conversation carried on by the planet itself. One response leads naturally toward another, each shaped by climate, geography, and opportunity instead of intention. Basilosaurus did not prepare the sea for songs echoing across thousands of kilometers, which is about 621 miles. It did not anticipate coordinated family groups or migrations spanning entire ocean basins. It lived fully within its own chapter, complete from beginning to end, while the ocean continued writing after the final page of that chapter had closed. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson preserved within its bones. The first answer does not lose its value because later answers become more intricate. Every beginning carries a completeness that belongs only to its own moment. Basilosaurus filled an empty place in the history of life with extraordinary certainty, proving that a mammal could become entirely at home in open water. Everything that followed grew from a different world, guided by different seas and different possibilities. The ocean never returned to the age of Basilosaurus. It continued onward, composing new forms from familiar beginnings. The first answer remained written in stone. Everything after it became the song.